Hello all, I'm Sai and you're watching The Book Dragon. In today's video, I'm bringing to you some short reviews of some very popular romance books which I read in the past 2 to 3 months. And not all of these 5 romances are latest releases. Some of them are really old books and some of them are comparatively new also. I just wanted to read books from this specific genre because I don't read that many romance books and I know that all these 5 books are really highly ranked in the genre. I'm not saying that these are the only popular romance books out there. It's just that I decided to read these 5 because I was interested in them. First, I'll tell you guys what the books are and then we'll go for the specific reviews for each and every one of the 5 books separately. So the 5 books are The Song of Achilles by Madelline Miller, Book Lovers by Emily Henry, Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas, and at last Number 9 by Colleen Hoover. Now let's get into the reviews right away. So the first popular romance book which I read for this video is The Song of Achilles by Madelline Miller. I actually started listening to the audiobook of this one in 2020, but it was very sad as a narration, so I was not interested in reading the audiobook back then because all of us were sad back in 2020, right? So it's been 2 years since then and I finally picked it up and read it physically right now, and I should say that reading it physically was a far greater experience than it was an audiobook, and I just enjoyed the story from top to bottom. It is definitely a tragic tale and a sad story, but the way in which the author has written it beautifully and shown both the main characters to us here is just awesome. Now this is basically a modern retelling of the Iliad, but focusing on the love story of Achilles and Patroclus alone in the forefront. Now I'm a person who's not that familiar with Greek mythology, and I also don't have the complete knowledge of Greek mythology as a whole, so it was very fresh for me to read this book because I don't know these stories before. But if you're a person who does know Greek mythology really well, I'm sure that you'll be able to enjoy this far more than I do, because there are multiple characters other than Patroclus and Achilles alone whom we follow here, and if you know who those characters are and their backstories separately, I'm sure that it'll be even more enjoyable and interesting for you to read. This is basically the story of how Patroclus and Achilles come together and develop a friendship, and how that friendship evolves into a romantic relationship between each of them. How the world does not understand it and it does not need to understand it for them to like each other is the actual story of this book. Even though it's a tragedy towards the end, I should say that the journey that both of these men go through in their lives when they are together is very rich, lush and super romantic and beautiful to read. Being a heavily character driven reader myself, I think that the character work that the author has done for both the main characters in this one is just extremely well. And of the two main characters, I think Patroclus' character is done even more beautifully by the author, because we get the story narrated from his point of view. If the tone in which the story is narrated by him is changed a little bit, I can easily say that the book can sound a lot more whiny and not feel good at all, but it is not done in that way. It is very original and super transparent and pure in its nature, so I did like the point of view in which the story was written extremely. At the same time, the backstories of both the main characters, Achilles as well as Patroclus, is clearly given to us properly here. It is not like both of them had the same kind of life growing up, even though both of them are princes. The way in which Patroclus was completely shunned out by his father, and how Achilles was taken up by both his father as well as mother and grown properly in this kingdom, are properly shown to us here. And I think the distinction in the way in which both the characters were brought up is clearly made into use in the successive chapters inside the story as a whole. I also like the relationship that Patroclus has with both Achilles as well as Briseis. Especially the relationship with Briseis is not romantic in any way at all, but the affection that both of them have for each other and for Achilles is just very beautiful to read. I think Briseis as a character itself was someone who just portrayed that subtle strength properly throughout the story. It's not like she is a physically strong character, but the guts that she has and the clarity that she has in her mind towards both of these men is just awesome. How she sees Patroclus and how much she wants to help both of them is clearly portrayed in each and every scene that she comes in, and I think she is a very pure character that was properly shown in the story for us. Even the inclusion of Chiron and some of the Greek gods like Thetis and Apollo inside the story just added multiple layers for the book as a whole personally for me, because it just felt like a Greek retelling in the beginning and it sounded sad and slow for me, but when all of these characters were added and the things that they provided for the story just made it feel like even more fantastical in its tone. Even though all those things were going on, how the relationship between Patroclus and Achilles is concentrated in the forefront and shown to us, even though there is this huge war going on in Troy in the background, was really nice to read. There are all those things that are the effects of war that are faced by both of the main characters here, but what is happening in their minds and their relationship when all these things are going on around them were really well written and portrayed by the author here. The thing which astonished me the most when it comes to this book is the pacing that the author has used. Okay, it is extremely consistent, and I was very awestruck of how the author achieved it at all, because we follow the entire life of one of the two two main characters here, and we have a number of time jumps because the book is very short in its length. It's not even 400 pages long, but the things that we see here happening are throughout the life of Patroclus, and even though she makes such many time jumps and takes some time in order to establish the relationship between the characters for us, it does not feel slow or bored in any way at all. It just feels perfect, and I just don't understand how she did it, but she has done it perfectly. Even the writing of the author in this one was very beautiful. It was not flowery and over the top at any instant at all. It was like perfectly metered and calibrated, if you ask me. So that is something which I just enjoyed about the writing of the author very much. When talking about the writing itself, I also want to say one thing. Since it is a modern detailing, there were some dialogues which are included as greetings between the characters like hello, which just felt so much unreal for me because they don't fit inside that time period at all. Except for such really tiny nitpicks, I totally loved the experience of reading this book. Finally, I love the ironic title of this book because it is named the Song of Achilles, but most of the story is spent with Patroclus, and we spend most of our time with Patroclus also compared to any other characters inside this book, and I loved Patroclus more than any other character inside the book also. I think the title just shows us how much he's been overseen compared to all the other characters inside the story, and that in its own way is just completely gut-wrenching and so very beautiful. So yeah, I completely enjoyed the Song of Achilles, and I want a hardcover edition of the blue cover of this one. I'm not talking about the 10th anniversary edition, but the American blue cover, which I'll try to drop a cover of here. I think this cover portrays the mood of the story a lot better compared to this one. I'm not saying that this is not beautiful, but I think this just portrays it far better. So yeah, this is the first book inside this video, and the next book that I'm going to read is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. So I'll see you guys after I finish reading that. So the second book which I finished reading for this video is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which is an adult contemporary romance. Unlike the Song of Achilles, this is actually inside the genre of romance itself, and it is also one of my most anticipated releases for this year. I should say that I was not at all disappointed in any way while I was reading this one because it had almost each and everything that I expected from the writing of this author. I have read the past two books that the author has written, which are Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation. Of the three, Beach Read is my most favorite until now because it was her first book and it had the perfect theme for the name of the book also. This one is also very close to that one. Still, it is not as good as Beach Read. It is better than People We Meet on Vacation, but not as good as Beach Read in my personal opinion. And I completely loved each and every aspect of this book. Here we follow our two main characters, Nora and Charlie, both of whom are working inside the publishing industry, and Nora is actually a literary agent, and her main job is to find really good stories and bring them to publishing so that the authors get all the popularity that they deserve. During one such of a project, what happens is she meets this person named Charlie, who's kind of in a superior position than her inside the industry, and both of them do not start at a good place. After that, they just part ways and do their own work, during which Nora's younger sister Libby offers to take her on a vacation for 1 month away from work, and Nora also accepts to that and goes with her. Even during the vacation, what happens is Nora keeps on bumping into Charlie, and both of them come to a deal to publish this book based on some of the changes that both of them bring to it by being in contact with the author. But the main things which we focus on here are not the characters and the story that is happening in the present, but the past stories of both the two main characters here, especially Nora. Nora here has been through a lot in her past life, and she has come to this position only by working very hard. Since she also had a younger sister whom she had to bring up because both of her parents were not available during the time when Nora entered college and Libby was an adolescent, Nora had a lot of responsibilities. The way in which the author has written each and everything about them and the relationship between Nora and Libby is just awesome in every way. Personally, I am a person who likes reading sibling relationships in any kind of story, and in this one, the sibling relationship was done excellently by the author. While focusing on Nora, we don't leave Charlie out of the equation also. Even his past is explored, but it is not as detailed as it is that with Nora. And when we learn some of the new facts about Charlie, it just baffles us each and every time. The way in which both of them come in contact with each other and start developing feelings for each other is really well done. And some of the miscommunication that happens between Nora and her sister and how it is all resolved towards the ending of the book is also really well done. In the first two books, that is in Beach Read as well as People We Meet on Vacation, there is this kind of breakup which happens like in any other romance book towards the ending of the book, but in this one it was not like that. It was just like a misunderstanding which is talked out and properly understood by both the main characters here. There are many things that the author talks about from the past of Nora that are tried to be lived even more in a comfortable way in her present life right now because she can afford a lot of stuff, and all those scenes just make it even more heartwarming and even more real in every aspect for me. While having the title Book Lovers, the book does not fail to impress us book lovers who love reading about bookish things. And since both of our main characters here are also book lovers, they have a lot of things going on in their mind when it comes to organizing books and the kind of books that they like, the stories that they like, the way in which books gave a space for them in their lives and took them in. All those things were really well done by the author here. There are also two bookstores which we see throughout that book, and each and every scenes that happen inside both of those bookstores are really beautiful. So as a whole, this was a complete package for me, and I was not at all disappointed in any way. The reason why I rated it 4.5 4.75 stars instead of 5 stars is because there are some instances inside the pacing of the story where it lags a little because the miscommunication is used as a device. At the same time, since we jump between the past and present, that also provides a little bit friction to the pacing. Other than that, there is no fault with this book at all in my personal opinion, and I totally enjoyed it. And I can easily say that I'm very glad that I picked it up for this video. So the next book which I'll be reading for this video is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. I've also heard really great things about that one. So I'll meet you guys again after reading it. There was a slight change in plan, guys, so I did not read The Spanish Love Deception next. Instead of it, I read Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, and I should say of all the 3 books that I've read so far for this video, this is the best because it just felt like a very real story and it did not feel like fiction in any way at all. I'm sure a story like this one can happen to any 2 people out there in the world, and it is highly probable, and the way in which the author has narrated it just feels very close to the heart. It didn't have anything that I'm used to in my actual life, but the way in which the story connected with me and the characters connected with me was just awesome. It also felt super original compared to anything that I've read so far in romance, because the 2 characters who meet here, just like in most romance novels, are completely opposite to each other and they don't have any similarities at all. But the way in which they find common ground and the presence or non-presence of love in this one is the best part which I loved. So here we follow our main characters Lou and Will, of whom Lou has just lost her job in a bakery and she's just worked there for the longest time in her life, and she's very much used to that environment also because she's a very chatty person and she's a very fun-loving extroverted person, and she's not very much skilled in any other thing also. Ever since childhood, her sister is the one who has excelled in each and every academic thing in their household and not her, and because of this she has had this kind of complex also. At this point, she has lost her job, and when she tries to get a job, she ends up being the helper of this quadriplegic named Will, and the way in which Will has lost his ability to use his hands and legs is because of an accident that occurred to him. The accident is properly shown to us in the beginning of the book itself, and it is not in graphic detail also. It is just brought to our attention that he has lost his ability to move by himself because of this accident, and there is not that much of his fault also because of which the accident occurred. Before the accident, Will was a very well accomplished elite adult, but after the accident, all of the things in his life just changed completely, and the way in which they end up changing him also, from being a very happy, colorful and energetic person to someone who's very depressed and sullen always. We cannot say him at fault for any of that because he has lost his ability to move, and that is one thing which he has taken for granted for the entirety of his life before the accident. But after this, he is very much bitter because he does not think life is fair in any way, because the accident has completely turned off his life and it is not fair also. That is the point during which Lou comes into her life, and the way in which she changes his life with her energy gradually is the story of this book. I should say I enjoyed each and every chapter of this one, okay? There is also this very wonderful atmosphere in which the story takes place because everything that happens in this book happens in England, and the climate of England itself provides a really good atmosphere. I think any other climate would not have sat well for this kind of a story because it just felt really original for me. Talking about the main characters, I should say both of them were really original, okay? That's the one thing which just keeps on repeating in my mind when I think about this book, because each and every aspect of the story just felt very new and fresh to me. It's not even a new book, it's a book which was published more than a decade back, but even now it just feels very fresh to me. Both of the main characters were not boring or irritating at any point inside the story, because there were multiple points during which the main characters might have felt so much boring and not human to me, but during no instant did I feel like that at all. At the same time, there is one thing which I enjoyed about this book so much. It is the inclusion of the families of the 2 main characters, okay? When it comes to romance books or any kind of books which are contemporary in nature, we focus on the main characters but we don't spend that much time with their families, even though for most people the families are the things which shape a major constituent of their personality. We spend so much time with Lou's family as well as Will's family, and the way in which both of these families are very different and are living their own kind of life is very excellent to read. I like the dynamic in Lou's family compared to that of Will's, because Will is from a very well-to-do wealthy family, whereas Lou is not from such a background. All of them live in a single house, and the way in which they compromise one's needs for the others. At the same time, the type of parenting that we see here as well as that with Will are completely different, and they just provide a really good palette for the story. And the writing of the author is also excellent in this one, because she uses the perfect amount of description in order to provide us the ambience as well as the atmosphere in which the story takes place, because that is one thing which is very important for us to experience the story properly, because it does not happen in a normal environment in which romance novels usually happen, but happens in a very different setup because of the condition of the 2 main characters whom we see here and the things that they experience in their lives, and the way in which she characterized Will and shows all the difficulties that are faced by him because of the fact that he's on a wheelchair feel really proper and informative, if you ask me, because not every one of us knows a person who's on a wheelchair, and we don't know all the difficulties that they have to face to do really normal things that we do on a daily basis. At the same time, while doing that, the author does not make the book feel sad or depressing in any way at all, because one of our main characters is on a wheelchair and it is not a good thing or a happy thing to read about. It's definitely a sad thing that has been acknowledged. At the same time, it is shown that even though their life is difficult, it is possible to live that life also with with a lot of hope and positivity, despite it being extremely physically and mentally jarring. So in that way, this book was just perfect for me. So from my rambling itself, you could have easily understood that I rated this 5 stars. I think if I had rated this anything less than 5 stars, I would have felt very guilty, because I know this book deserves all the attention and fame that it has, because it is very proper and very pure in its tone. I'm just so glad that I read it, and it's also an added good thing that I read it for this video. So I'm planning to read the Spanish Love Deception next, so I'll meet you guys once I finish reading that. So I read the Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas at last, guys, and I should say this was a great surprising read for me, because I enjoyed this book from top to bottom completely. I did not expect this book to be this good, if you ask me. Here we follow our main characters Catalina and Aaron, who are working in the same company as engineers. And the thing with Catalina is that she is 28 years old right now, and she is Spanish by ethnicity, so she has to go back to Spain in order to attend her sister's marriage. And during that time, what is the catch that she has is that she has lied to her family, saying that she is dating a man here and she'll be bringing him as a date to the wedding. So our male lead here, Aaron, offers to be her date for her marriage in exchange for a favor from her. She does that favor first to him, and because of this, Aaron also goes along with Catalina and attends the wedding at Spain. I can say for almost 40% of the book we do not go to Spain, and both the portions which happen in New York as well as Spain are really funny and sometimes also very cute to read. The story is narrated from the point of view of Catalina, and I should say that was a great choice done by the author, because she has a really nice funny voice, and the way in which she narrates the story is really fun, except one aspect alone, which I'll talk about further on in the video. The way she sees her office staff, she sees her friend, how she sees Aaron, who's the male lead of the story, all these things were really fun to read. I think this book can be made into a really good adaptation which can be super entertaining. I'm not saying that it is a kind of book which can be done as a rom-com alone, but a rom-com which has a lot of substance put into it. Of course, the main character whom we see here is a very stereotypical kind of male lead that is shown for us in rom-coms like this one. Yet excluding that alone, I can say the entire story was really compelling and entertaining for me to read. I enjoyed everything from the first chapter to the last in every aspect possible. There is only a small chunk of the book which gets a bit serious towards the end, but I think that was also a really good decision made by the author, because it elevated the ending of the book in a good way for me. There are also some steamy and sexy scenes that are written by the author, especially towards the ending of the book. I can say there's like a huge chapter which is just the extended sex scene alone. That alone got a bit off track from the tone in which the story was narrated for us, but that is kind of understandable in a way. She has a lot of descriptions written in order to make us visualize the place in which the story is taking place. At the same time, that visualization does not get very difficult, because she does not provide that much description. She just gives a handful of description in order to understand where this thing is happening, so that we can just stand in that place and see what is happening between these characters. Personally, for me, when it comes to romance books, I don't expect for that much of an ambience or setup for the story to take place, because this is just a contemporary story. So I can picture the world in which it is taking place, because it is the same world where we are also living. Since half the book actually happens in Spain itself, that is not a setup which I'm used to reading from. And the way in which she describes the food, the culture there, the way in which people interact with each other, the boundaries that they have and the boundaries they don't have, the way in which they talk with each other, all those things were really well done by the author. There were some Spanish phrases alone which were just thrown here and there, which did not make sense for me because I don't know Spanish. I think all those dialogues could have been translated to English also, so that us readers who do not know the language can also enjoy it completely. But I should say it was a really fun and comfortable, laugh-worthy book for me. Now, talking about the negative aspects of this book, I just had one problem alone. That is the way in which the male character was continuously described in each and every page almost. I did not feel it interesting to read in any way at all, because after a point it just got completely boring, and it just made me want to keep down the book aside, because I knew what she was going to describe and how she was going to describe it. It does not get obscene or cringy in any point, but when it is repeated each and every time continuously in each and every chapter, it just gets a bit too overpowering and boring to read the same thing again and again. Even if she had used some different words, it would have been okay. I know that such kind of descriptions are necessary in order to make this romance a bit more entertaining and steamy, but when it is repetitively done in the same way, using the same phrases again and again, it just gets a bit too annoying, and also makes me want to keep the book aside and just take a break from it, even though the story is going good. Apart from that stereotypical male character, I did not feel anything that was wrong about this book at all. I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It could have been easily a 5 star if not for that only negative aspect which I talked about just before. So the next book which I read for this video is Number 9 by Colleen Hoover. While I started filming this video, this book was actually not on my TBR for this, and also I've been filming this video for the past 2 months, okay, so it's been much longer than I intended it to be. Here we follow our two main characters, Ben and Fallon, who meet on this particular date, November 9th, when they are both 18, and after meeting on that particular day, they have a good time with each other. It's not like sexy in any way in the beginning, but later it gets a bit smutty, and I should say that it's not like in an unnecessary way, and we follow both of them meeting each other for 5 years exactly on November 9th. So the story story ends when they are 23 years old. I should say that this is a sad story in some aspects and also a happy story towards the ending, and it was very different from any romance that I've read so far. Obviously, it's not the best thing that I've read so far also, but I should say I read only It Ends With Us by this author before this one, and I enjoyed that book a lot more than this one. I don't think there was anything that was unnecessary in that book, but when it comes to this one, I think some parts could have been trimmed out and toned down a bit because I felt some scenes and some lines made me cringe at instances, but I cannot say that that intruded or spoiled my reading experience in any way. And one other thing which I just loved about this book is that one of the two main characters whom we follow here, Fallon, who's the girl, is the victim of a fire accident, and because of this, one half of her body is burnt and she has burn scars running all over her body. The way in which the author has shown the discomfort that she has based on her appearance is really well written. I cannot say that it was perfect in any way, but I was able to empathize with that character and feel how she might feel because of a thing that happened to her, and that thing was not even her mistake. It is not like our main character is whiny or unambitious in any way because of the thing that happened to her. She does not keep it as an excuse to hinder the ambition that she has in her life, and I just appreciated a lot that particular trait of the character in this book. When it comes to the male character, I did not like him as much because he just felt like a template for most male characters when it comes to romances like this one. It is not abusive in any way, but it is definitely a dominant character. More than the male character, I want to talk a lot more about Fallon in this one because she just stood out a lot more than any other character inside the book for me. She did not feel like a typical female character that we see in romances nowadays. I've been meaning to read this ever since I finished reading It Ends With Us, and finally I picked it up for this video, and I'm glad that I did it also because even though it was not a completely perfect book or a 5-star read for me, for a 4-star I should say that this was a very strong 4-star read, except for some choices that the author made when it comes to some lines or phrasing some lines in particular. I liked every other thing about this story. Of course, it is sexy and steamy in some instances, especially during the end of the book, but apart from that, I did not feel anything uncomfortable about this book at all. And one thing which I appreciate about the main character in this one is that she just shows us how much it is necessary to work for something which you want, even though you might not be able to achieve it then and there right away. It doesn't matter whether you are able to do it, it just matters whether you tried hard for it or not. I think Fallon tried so much hard for what she wanted, and I respect that character so much for that. There's obviously some parental trauma in this book also, just like in It Ends With Us, but in this one there's kind of a redemption also. The best part in this book for me was that it was a very quick read. Okay, it's around 300 pages long, but it does not take a lot of time to read because you're just focusing on these 5 different days which are November 9th for 5 years, and when our characters meet and what are the things that happen between them. It is very angsty, and that angst is something which just adds on a really beautiful layer for the book. It's not like both of our main characters are confident about everything that they are doing in their lives. They are insecure, they have a lot of things going on, yet they make it a point to meet each other on that particular date each and every year, and I think that speaks about that relationship to some extent. They are also not controlling in any way when it comes to the other person. I'm not talking in depth as well as elaborately about the plot because it's better if you go in knowing nothing and then experiencing the book for yourselves, because I did not go into this book knowing a lot of things, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I enjoyed reading it. It is definitely not a unique book or anything, but the way the author orchestrates some events inside the story for the characters and between the characters is really nice. She shows us that they are both not leading happy or easy lives. They have their own challenges, they have their own self-doubt, and how they make their progress despite all those things and trust each other, at times even forgive each other, is just awesome. As a whole, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I think instead of 4 stars, I can even say that I'm rating it 4.25 stars because it was that good. Just keep in mind that this will not be an easy read for you, even though it will be a quick read. There are multiple dark and hard things that happen to the characters which must be kept in mind, and if you're a person who gets put off because of strong and violent scenes, I'd not suggest you to go for it right away. Just search for some content warnings and trigger warning, and if you're okay with all of them, then go forward and try it. Except that it was definitely a good book, and I think I'll read a lot more by Colleen Hoover from now on. So yes guys, those are my mini spoiler free reviews for all these 5 romance books, and I should say I completely enjoyed reading each and every one of these 5 books. Somewhere a bit less than what I expected, and at the same time somewhere completely surprisingly great for me. I'm sure that I'm going to read a lot more romance books in the future because it has proved to be a genre which is getting me out of reading slumps. So I believe this video was useful in some way or the other for you, and if you did enjoy watching it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.